Please welcome Justin Hall.
Good morning. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. So, hello. Hi. My name is Justin Hall. 20 years ago, I got on the web and I saw this crazy open space where people were beginning to describe themselves and the research they were doing. And in December 1993, there were maybe 600 sites, and you could surf the whole web in about 2 weekends, and you could start to see that, man, there's a lot of potential in this thing. And as a result of seeing this web, I thought, I'm going to put myself into this space. I want to join these people up in this internet. So I pulled together Justin's homepage, which was a way to introduce myself to the web and collect a few of my favorite links and things that I'd found. And as I began to continue to surf this early web, I pulled together what I called Justin's Links from the Underground. And this meant that I began to share myself. Now, this Links from the Underground led to some opportunity to have visitors to my website and people saying, hey, you know, cool links, buddy. And as a result of seeing these links, I said, well, maybe I can share the story of my life in this same medium where I'm sharing and finding these links. And each one of these blue underlined words would take you to a page where you could read about a family member or a friend or a drug experience or a fight that I had with someone I loved. And it was so fun to use the web to tell the story of my life, to use that hypertext to say, I'm going to have a conversation with you, stranger, and you can follow up on the topics about me that you might care about. So this excitement for the web in those early days and the sharing of my personal truth and the churning through of links. And I was 19 years old, so I was really passionate in particular about sex and about recreational substances and weird stuff that you could only find on the web because media was otherwise tamed, meant that I curated these links from the underground and had 27,000 daily readers in 1995. I mean, that was kind of crazy to be that young and on a medium that new and have that much attention. And I'm here to tell you, to give you a hint, that through a series of conscious decisions and hard work over the last 20 years, I've been able to take that 27,000 daily readers and bring it to 250 daily readers. I'm not going to be able to explain to you today every way in which you might do the same. But I'll give you, there'll be some other ways you can follow up to learn. So, what would make someone want to do these things? Well, I was a lonely child, I think, and I craved a lot of contact and stimulation. And so, when I was in second grade, I invented a game. This is a game called Push and Shove. And the game takes place in a queue, like in a line when you're waiting to go somewhere. Okay, so if you're in this line, you would push the person ahead of you, shove the person behind you, and you sing all the while, push and shove and push and shove. And in a short amount of time, you'll have a mosh pit, and you'll have so much contact and connection and stimulation. And unfortunately, it also meant that I was exiled to a desk in the back of the class separate from my peers, and I was escorted individually to my classes and not allowed to wait in line with people anymore. So that was second grade. In third grade, my father passed away due to alcoholism. And, you know, I think when you're 8 years old and your father dies, you lose sync with some of your peers, you know? Like, they talk about the stuff their dads do or that they're proud of, and you don't have those things. And furthermore, I think I was 8 years old and my father committed suicide. So when, you know, suddenly someone you are told to admire and respect in the sort of order of human life says, hey, I gotta go somewhere else. And I can't really tell you why, but I'm out. And then you are left to hold that thought for a long time as their child. Like, do they know something I don't know? Is there something that they figured out that I'm going to figure out later? So I think I wrestled a lot with that why did my father kill himself question during my growing up years, and to this day still. And so it was something that I wrote a lot about on my website. And sharing this kind of personal experience on the web meant that I got a different kind of response from the nice sex links, buddy. And it was that people would say, my father also left when I was a child. And suddenly, it felt a bit like I was making real human connections with people, and that the work of sharing your life on the web might ease someone else's suffering. Wow, what if technology could ease suffering? That might actually be a calling for all of us. So I felt encouraged by this kind of email to share more. I shared difficult things in my life, like in 10th grade, I had a particularly bad year. I failed math, biology, and history. These comments are from one of the latest sort of personal doxing experiments I've done, where I scanned by hand every grade and comment I've received from 1979 to 1993. They have all been uploaded 2 days ago to this URL if you want to read all my grade school comments. In addition, I had a chance to experiment with LSD, and I don't recommend it for everyone, but you know, it can be a fascinating experience. It's often unlabeled with not a lot of guidance. If you have the materials in front of you and you're thinking of using them, you don't know what the dosage might be or what experience you might have or how best to shape your experience. Do you need a clean pair of underwear? So I've posted on my website trip reports from the times that I've used LSD. Trips number 2, 11, 14, and 35 are live on the web. In addition, in college I caught a sexually transmitted disease from sex without a barrier with a partner. And it hurt to pee. And you know, I thought this is something that I was sort of surprised about. And I thought I should share it with other people so that they could avoid these problems. And also, there's good news. You know, it was non-specific urethritis. A doctor told me. And you can take, there's Western medicine that can make that pain go away. So these are the types of things that I thought if I could share them, they would make people feel less alone. If you're in pain, you would feel less isolated. And then I was traveling in rural Japan, and I had another opportunity to have sex, and afterwards I had some really uncomfortable and also quite odd-looking sort of thing happen to my genitals. And so, but I was in rural Japan, and it was late at night. My language skills were not that great, and so I felt kind of a little afraid of going to a doctor or trying to find one. And so I decided that it would be better to take extremely explicit pictures and put them up on the web and share them. And the good news is someone was reading my website and they said, oh, you have paraphimosis. No problem. Just wait, it'll go away. And they were right. So this was sort of an experiment, over the years. Could I peel off my skin and be honest and be explicit and be direct with the web as a way to encourage intimacy? So paraphimosis and then just nudity, just sort of saying, look, I'll tell you about my dead dad, and I'll tell you about my girlfriend, and I'll tell you about my life, and just so you know who you're dealing with, here's this guy. And then, sometimes I like to, sort of get loose, So I think the idea that I wanted to, at that time, just increase intimacy through exposure and sharing. Like, could you create intimacy with strangers by opening up and revealing things of yourself? And when you think about it, being naked in public, once you've done that, you don't really have a lot to hide. And if you don't have a lot to hide, you don't have a lot to be afraid of, I thought. So the more I did this, the crazier emails I got. And I got death threats, and I got, other sorts of hostilities, but I got a lot of people who wanted to share their stories with me, or their pictures, or their experiences. And I'm 20 years old, and people are telling me about their dead parents and alcoholism in their families and like their own recipes for psychedelic drugs. And I'm like, I can't hold all these stories for all these people. So I decided to teach people how to make websites like mine so that anybody could tell their story. Because if you have a story, you could share it somewhere online. There's a place for your story. And I thought, if I tell people how to make web pages, they can find their own audience. I don't have to be their only audience. And that's a good solution for people who are on the internet. They could find these tutorials and teach themselves some HTML and put up their website. But it wasn't helpful for people who weren't on the web. And in the early days of the internet, in the mid-1990s, it was clear that this had an enormous amount of potential, but it wasn't clear that people who weren't of a certain class or education level were going to get access to these tools to tell stories. So I got on a Greyhound bus. I traveled through the United States, staying in the South and the Midwest and the West, Southwest, and staying with readers who enjoyed my website and teaching anyone in their community how to make web pages. And I had sort of weird hair, so I looked like a little bit of an ambassador from the internet, maybe a little antenna on top telling people where the future might be. And, it was a great chance to test this theory that if you took strangers and you added honesty, you might get empathy. What an idea that might be. That if all of us knew more about people we didn't know, we might have less violence in the world, right? Because so much violence comes from intolerance and a lack of understanding. If we could use this technology to sort of raise our ambient awareness of each other in this shared world, we might chill out a little bit. So maybe that's sort of happened. We have, we're like Tahrir Square, go Democrats, democracy, people of Tahrir Square. We have Ferguson, Missouri. We say we need to do what we can from far away for justice there. We also have the Islamic State on Instagram and the rich kids of Instagram. And so, it's sort of a mixed bag on whether strangers plus honesty equals empathy. But we do have the opportunity to judge and advise more people from afar than ever before. So this was my thesis when I was 19 years old. And I don't know if you can really see from where you are, but I'm sort of losing hair here. This is like where the hair's falling out. And when I smile, and sometimes when I don't now, I have wrinkles here. I'll be 40 this year. And, I think I was a young, upper-class, optimistic, hetero-flexible white male who thought that, everybody should get loose on the internet and that this would sort of solve everybody's problems. But, that wasn't necessarily fair for me to expect that everybody could keep up with my level of disclosure and feel safe and comfortable. And as it turns out, the world is such an amazing teacher. I learned that maybe sharing as much as I shared was actually lonely, alienating, and isolating. Sort of like push and shove. So, so the first web page came out in 1991. Thank you, Tim. And the second web page, or not the second web page, geez, my web page came out in 1994. And then they started inventing search engines, right? So we had these search engines and these search engines and these search engines. And the search engines that we really use today and the sort of approach to finding web pages that we have came about in 96, 97. And suddenly, it wasn't like you said, I'm going to seek out weird shit on the internet. It was like, oh my God, I was searching for something and I found weird shit on the internet. And like this really changed things because, you know, I don't know if you've had this experience, but when you come to the internet for the first time, a lot of people will type in their name to see what's on the internet, if there's anything about them. Well, I provided a lot of people's first experience with having their name on the internet through my personal writings, because I wrote them all before there were search engines. And I was like, I had the most fantastic time dropping acid and wandering the streets with this person. And, oh, or I tried cocaine once, but it was really sad. And this person told me this thing. And, oh gosh, you know, I got in a fight with this person. And all those things people did not want to see about themselves on the internet when they got there. And, you know, I think it was in the mid-90s, I was interviewed for this documentary called Homepage. And I think when I watch some of this footage now, which is challenging for me, I think that my thought at that time was that knowing me was consent to be written about in public on the web. Because you know, when I met anybody, I had this antenna, and people would say, what do you do? And I would say, I write about my life on the internet, and I would have a notepad and in a tool belt that I would pull out and begin writing, and then I would take a picture of them, and then I would say, I write about my life on the web, and they'd be like, wow. And then 9 months later, they'd search for themselves, and they'd be like, I'm on the same page with a picture of you in garter belts. Like, I can't do this, you know, like, please. So I had to, you know, and it was sad at family gatherings because there were family members who were like, I'm not going to speak candidly anymore because, you know, this family member here is writing down what we're saying at the dinner table to put it on the web tonight. So I had to learn to write differently about my life on the web. So I had to learn to stop using proper nouns and full names. And I had to learn to stop implicating other people in my experimental experiments. And I had to learn to stop using maybe explicit details about where people lived or what they did. And then I had to learn to maybe just stop describing other people in public. So I could still write on the web, but, you know, it was a little less intimate. So for the first 94 to 2001, I wrote in text editors like Emacs or BBEdit, and it was hands-on. My website is like, I think, over 4,000 pages, and I think, like, I don't know, a few thousand of them are by hand, but then they get this software, Movable Type, in 2002, and it would automate posting new reverse chronological ordered entries on a front page, weblogs. And they also had comments on these weblogs. And now I could invite the people who'd been writing emails to correspond with each other around my content. And it was exciting because it was like I was hosting a little web party online. And suddenly people began to apply textual analysis to my life and feed back to me. This comment really screwed me up for a while. This was someone who had been reading my website for years and was basically like, I've seen this guy fall in love 2 or 3 times now, and I think he's basically incapable of being a good partner in a relationship, and here's why, in citation. I mean, that was a really intense experience because I wasn't sure that they were wrong. So, you know, I had a romantic partner at the time when this was posted, and this person said, I do not want to be a party to this analysis. Like, I do not want my relationship to be subject to this scrutiny by strangers. And I had a choice. I had the choice, like, someone breathing adjacent, someone analyzing far away, and I decided to choose this person. And so I withdrew from the sort of depth of intimacy I had developed with the web, which was not easy because when you're sharing stories of family difficulties or personal stuff online for years and years, you have this voice of sharing that it hurts to sort of stop talking that way. You know, you lose a friend, except it's yourself. So I pulled back and recorded a video.
I can't write about people. They don't want to be there, and I have nothing to write about. I have nothing to write about if I can't write about people, and I have nowhere to go with all this shit.
You know, looking back, I'm like, at least I documented my withdrawal from documentation. And, you know, I did this for a relationship. You know, I said, maybe it's more important to choose a relationship than it is to choose this sort of personal media production and personal experimentation. And that was an experiment that ended in divorce. And when the divorce happened, I decided that, you know, I would take a few years, write some poems, do some thinking, and then maybe I would come back to the web and use that experience of sharing personal media to go back to myself on the floor, on all fours, crawling, snot coming out of my nose, sobbing, realizing that I'd had a dream that was dead, and say, hey, buddy, it's okay. You'll have more dreams, and they'll die, and then more dreams will come, and the chance to write that story for myself and go back and tell it to myself felt like a great catharsis. And I waited a long time. I didn't want there to be any revenge. There are no identifying details for my partner in this, and it's not about that other person, it's about my experience. And I felt I could do this in a responsible way. But instead of it being Justin goes and writes about his LSD trip last night live on the web, it's Justin takes some time to digest and then shares a 15-minute long video of him staring in the camera talking about divorce. Something to look forward to, maybe watch with your partner. So during that interlude, when I stepped off of daily updating on the web, I thought, you know, I attempted to transform surfing the web into a massively multiplayer online game because I thought surfing the web is a little too isolated. Maybe you could do a passively multiplayer online game where you're constantly earning points for what you look at online, and it builds a character profile of you based on the kinds of stuff you look at, and then using a browser toolbar you could like put treasure or traps on different sites, and the people who follow in your wake would stumble upon your trail and know your might. And so this led to some kind of opportunity to have a company called Game Layers and 9 employees and raise $2 million and transform the PMOG into the Nethernet. And it was a huge chance for me to go from being a sort of personal exposure journalist to being CEO of a company that was not successful. There are people who played this game and enjoyed it, and I've met them and I'm so honored. And I learned a lot, but the game itself did not make any money. So when it was all over, I went to the people who had given us money and the people who had helped me make this thing, and I said, let's open source the software. Let's also open source the business process. So I wrote 11,000 words with all the pitch decks and the term sheets and the contracts and the financial statements and everything you would want to know if you were ever thinking, I have an idea, I should make a company. You could read this first and decide whether you still want to do that. And maybe, furthermore, maybe you've thought, wow, we are so in love over here, it would be great to run a business together. This could give you some ideas of how you might preserve those relationships. So, this is published on the web, and I took 18 months to write this and get permission for it and publish it. So I like to see that I'm still incorrigibly publishing, but in a more adult fashion. And I got a job and paid down my debts from the startup and saved up a bunch of money, lowered my cost of living, and bought a green screen for my home that allows me to tell stories standing in front of a screen. And what I love about this idea that you can stand in front of this screen and tell a story is that it reminds me of the early web, because when I first began writing on the web, I would write something that I felt, but you can use the structure of the web to challenge the thing you're saying. And this is what's so great about hypertext that's not just like writing an essay. The links themselves and the way you deploy them can be commentary on what you're saying. Same with a green screen video. You get the chance to take yourself standing somewhere and transport yourself or add layers behind you. So in the last year, I've been producing the Justin Hall Show, and some of it's stuff like this, and some of it, I did an interview with Jamie Wilkinson from VHX, and Jake Lodwick from Keezy and Exposure, and with writer Quinn Norton, who's a fabulous journalist, and with Richard Stallman, who will talk about the same things consistently for years. And I rode the Amtrak for 50 hours from Chicago to San Francisco with my partner, and we shot videos together, and this is the story. I collaborated, I volunteered for the National Security Agency to help them promote an online backup service for everyone called Citizen Cloud. So this is a lot of fun, and to experiment with seeing if I could make this like a job, I've launched a page on Patreon, and I'm very pleased to have 65 people who've agreed to sponsor the Justin Hall Show, so they give a few bucks every time I produce an episode, which, you know, it's actually been about 4 months since I've made an episode, because I've been very focused on trying to tell this story I'm telling you in a short documentary. So I've been working on this film, and I'm very pleased that I'm going to screen it for you right now.
Who is Justin Hall, and why is he noteworthy?
So it'll be 40,000 times slower when I'm done, and I'm going to release it free on the web. And what I look forward to sharing with people is what I've learned from these experiments of sharing myself online. Is when I set out, I had a very strong ethic of honesty, play, and participation. This is what I believed in everyone should do online, and it would lead us all to a chance to have more empathy, and a chance to know ourselves better, and a chance to know all of our other potential friends on the internet. But the thing that I didn't know when I was 19, and that's such a wonderful teacher, is relationship. I needed to learn about relationship, because without relationship, your honesty, play, and participation is quite lonely. And so I'm very grateful to be up here in front of you, because we're all scientists of our own lives. We're all constantly running experiments, right, every day. And what the web allows us to do is to share our data. What are we learning about our experiments, about what it means to be a good person and be connected? And we can use the web to share those truths with each other and evolve them, because we don't know. And let's learn together until we're dead. Thank you.